Mullick Johnson had seen more of the world than most people could even imagine. For over 15 years, he had served in one of the most elite special operations units in the military Delta Force. His missions took him to dangerous places, far from home, far from comfort, and far from peace. He had walked through deserts under burning skies, crossed frozen mountains in silence, and faced things no man ever wanted to remember, but all that was behind him now. Or so he believed when Mullick finally returned to his small hometown in Georgia. He did so quietly. He didn't wear his medals, didn't speak of his rank, and didn't tell stories about his time in service. He wasn't looking for applause or attention. All he wanted was a quiet life, away from noise and conflict. What mattered now was family. What mattered was healing. His younger sister, Tasha Johnson, welcomed him with open arms. She had stayed. In their hometown, choosing a life of purpose. Tasha was a high school teacher who loved her students deeply. She also spent her time working with the local community, helping families, running programs for kids, and speaking up at town meetings whenever something didn't feel right. Everyone respected her. Her voice was soft but powerful. She had that special kind of strength that didn't need to shout. Mullick moved into a small house, just a few blocks from where they had grown up. The neighborhood had changed a little, but many of the old faces were still around. Every morning, he would walk to the nearby park with a cup of coffee in hand, nodding politely to the people he passed. Sometimes the neighbors would smile and wave, not knowing much about him, just that he was Tasha's older brother who had been in the army or something. That's how Mullick liked it. He didn't tell them about the medals he had earned. He didn't tell them about the friends he had lost. He didn't talk about how he could take apart a weapon in complete darkness or how he had led rescue missions in countries whose names people struggled to pronounce. That was another life, one he had locked away. Instead, he started small routines, fixing up his house, cooking meals for himself, helping Tasha with odd jobs around her place. He even began attending a few of her school events, quietly sitting in the back, watching her give speeches to parents and students. She had such confidence when she spoke, and Mullick was proud of her. She was the reason he had come back home. One day, while painting the fence in his backyard, Tasha stopped by with a grocery bag full of food. "You can't live off coffee and eggs forever," she said with a smile. "I was doing just fine," Mullick replied, laughing. Tasha rolled her eyes. "Yeah, sure, you look like you've lost 5 pounds in a week." Mullick didn't argue. He was just happy to have her there. They sat outside on the porch, eating sandwiches and talking about old memories, their parents, their childhood dog. The time Mullick got his bike stolen and spent 2 weeks looking for it before realizing it had been in the shed all along. There was peace in those moments, real peace. Something Mullick hadn't felt in a long time, but even in this quiet town, the world outside sometimes found its way in. A few weeks after Mullick's return, he noticed a shift. Tasha started coming home later than usual. Sometimes she seemed tired in a way he didn't remember. Not just physically, but emotionally. Her smile faded a little. Mullick asked her once if everything was okay, and she shrugged. "Just some noise around town," she said. "Some people aren't too happy with the work I've been doing." "What kind of work?" he asked. "Helping organize some meetings. Trying to get better funding for the schools. Pushing for more programs for the kids in our neighborhood." Mullick knew his sister well. She was the kind of person who never gave up when something was wrong. She had always been like that even as a child. But he also knew that standing up for others sometimes made you a target. Still, she didn't seem afraid. And he trusted her judgment. One evening, Tasha invited him to attend a community meeting at the town hall. Mullick agreed, more to support her than anything else. He sat quietly in the back, watching as Tasha stood before the room filled with local residents, council members, and parents. She spoke clearly, asking for better lighting in certain neighborhoods, more after-school programs, and safer public areas for children. She was calm and respectful but firm. The crowd clapped when she finished. Mullick felt a swell of pride in his chest, but not everyone clapped. A few people in the back row whispered among themselves. One man gave her a long, hard look as she walked off the stage. Mullick noticed it. His instincts kicked in, but he reminded himself he was no longer in the field. This wasn't a war zone. People could disagree. That didn't make them enemies. After the meeting, Tasha introduced Malik to a few of her friends. They talked, laughed, and shared stories about the town. But that man from earlier, he was still outside, leaning against his truck, watching. Malik kept it to himself. He didn't want to worry Tasha. Over the next few days, Malik began to pay more attention. He noticed subtle things like how Tasha checked her rearview mirror more often, or how she always locked her classroom door, even during lunch breaks. When he asked her again if everything was okay, she smiled. "It's nothing I can't handle," she said. Malik nodded. But in his mind, he quietly filed it away. Weeks passed, and the town prepared for the annual school fundraiser. Tasha had been organizing the whole thing: bake sales, music performances, raffles. Malik offered to help set up chairs and carry equipment. It was a fun, lighthearted event. Families showed up with kids. The school band played. People laughed and enjoyed themselves. Later that night, as they packed up, Tasha looked over at Malik. "Thanks for being here," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. She gave him a hug. It was the kind of hug that said, "Thank you for being my brother, and thank you for coming home." Malik looked up at the stars as they walked to their cars. The night was quiet, peaceful. He had no idea that everything was about to change. It started with little things. First, someone painted hateful words on a community center wall that Tasha had helped open just last year. The next week, flyers appeared on people's porches, ugly words and messages that made neighbors uneasy. Most people quietly threw them away, hoping it would stop. But Tasha didn't stay silent. She spoke at the next town meeting, standing tall and calm as always. "We've come too far to let fear pull us back," she told the crowd. "This town belongs to all of us." Many clapped, some even stood. But in the corners of the room, a few faces remained cold and still. Malik noticed them right away. His instincts, though softened by civilian life, never fully turned off. He didn't say anything that night. But in his mind, a quiet alarm had begun to ring. Tasha continued doing what she always did, teaching her students with passion, attending school board meetings, organizing food drives, and standing up for fairness whenever she saw something wrong. She had become more than a teacher in the community. She had become a voice for change. And while most people admired her courage, not everyone appreciated her efforts. One day, Malik stopped by her house with groceries. He found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, staring at the front page of the local paper. On it was a photo of Tasha at a protest she had helped lead the weekend before. "You okay?" he asked gently. Tasha nodded but didn't speak right away. "People have been saying things," she finally said. "Online, in person. Nothing serious. Just words. But it's growing. You can feel it." Malik took a seat across from her. "Do you feel safe?" Tasha smiled faintly. "Safe? I don't know. I feel strong. And I know I'm doing the right thing. That matters more." Malik admired her for that. He'd been trained to fight with weapons, but his sister fought with her heart and her voice. It was a different kind of bravery. Still, he couldn't ignore the signs. One evening, after driving Tasha home from a school meeting, he noticed a pickup truck parked across the street. It had dark-tinted windows and didn't belong to any of the neighbors. The next morning, it was gone. A week later, someone flattened Tasha's car tires while it was parked at the school. She didn't want to report it. "It's just a scare tactic," she said. "If I react, they win." Malik didn't argue, but his concern grew. He began changing his schedule without telling her. He started driving by her house more often. He even stopped by the school a few times under the excuse of dropping off lunch or helping with repairs. Tasha would laugh and call him overprotective. But she didn't ask him to stop. One Friday afternoon, the school hosted an open mic night away for students to share poems, songs, and short stories. Tasha helped organize it and invited Malik to attend. The room was filled with proud parents and excited kids. Malik watched from the back as Tasha introduced each student with a warm smile and words of encouragement. It was a joyful event, filled with laughter and creativity. For a while, everything felt normal, safe, but after the event as they walked out to the parking lot, Malik saw something that made him stop. There, scratched into the side of Tasha's car, were angry words, deep and clear. Someone had done it during the event while everyone was inside. Tasha stared at the damage, her face unreadable. "This isn't just a scare tactic anymore," Malik said quietly. She nodded. "Maybe it never was. The police took a report, but—" Malik could tell they weren't in a hurry. One officer even said, "It could have been kids messing around." Tasha thanked them politely, but once they left, she turned to Malik and whispered, "They're not going to help." Malik didn't disagree. He could see it in their eyes. They didn't want trouble. They wanted things quiet, but silence was not an option anymore. That weekend, Tasha gave a speech at a local college event about education and equality. She spoke with clarity and strength, and the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Malik watched from a distance, proud but uneasy. In the crowd, he noticed two unfamiliar men standing at the back. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just stared. Later that evening, Tasha stopped by Malik's house. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Last night, someone threw a rock at my window. It didn't break it. Just left a crack. I didn't call the police." Malik's jaw tightened. "You should have told me. I didn't want to worry you," she said. "But now, I don't know. Maybe I should have." He didn't say much after that. He just nodded and made her promise to call him if anything else happened. She agreed. But deep down, Malik knew she didn't want to live in fear or make others feel afraid for her. She wanted to stay strong. She wanted to believe that her town would stand with her. That same week, Tasha was scheduled to speak at a school board meeting. There had been debates about budget cuts that would affect programs in lower-income neighborhoods, including after-school activities. Tasha planned to fight those cuts with everything she had. Malik offered to drive her, but she said no, "I'll be fine. It's just a meeting." He let her go. But he watched her drive away, a feeling in his chest that wouldn't settle. The night air was quiet. Too quiet. An hour later, Malik's phone rang. It was a neighbor. "There's been an incident," she said, her voice shaking. "Tasha, something happened outside the school building." Malik didn't wait for details. He grabbed his keys and left the house in seconds. As he drove, memories flashed through his mind, memories he thought were buried. Training missions, emergency calls, the feeling in his chest when something was wrong, but you had to stay calm, focused. When he reached the school, flashing lights lit the parking lot. A small crowd had gathered behind yellow tape. Officers were speaking to witnesses. Malik's eyes scanned the area. Then he saw the paramedics. And he saw the stretcher. Tasha was conscious, but shaken. A deep bruise on her forehead, a cut on her arm. She tried to smile when she saw him. "I'm okay," she whispered. "They surprised me. I didn't see it coming." He walked beside the stretcher, holding her hand as they guided her into the ambulance. And in that moment, something shifted inside Malik Johnson. The quiet man, the peaceful veteran, the brother who had come home to start over. He looked up at the school, then at the people standing nearby. Some stared with worry, others with guilt, and a few looked away. Whoever had done this didn't know who they were dealing with, but they would. Malik had been many things in his life: soldier, strategist, leader, but none of those titles mattered now. As he sat in the waiting room of the hospital, waiting for any news about Tasha, his mind was consumed with one thing: finding the people who had hurt his sister and making them understand that they had made a grave mistake. Tasha had been released from the hospital after a few hours. The doctors reassured her that the bruises would heal and the cut on her arm was not serious. But Malik knew better than to think it was just a physical wound that would fade. The look in her eyes, that distant sadness, told him everything. This wasn't something that would go away easily. "Are you sure you're okay?" Malik asked once they were back at her house. "I can stay here tonight if you want." "I'm fine," Tasha replied, though her voice was quieter than usual. "It's just, I didn't expect this to happen. I knew things were tense, but I never thought it would get this far." Malik sat across from her at the kitchen table, his mind racing. He had to do something. He couldn't sit back anymore. The police hadn't done much. The investigation had barely started. It was clear that the authorities weren't taking it seriously, not yet. And Tasha, with her strong, independent spirit, had refused to let him intervene. She didn't want him to go into military mode, as she called it. But Malik wasn't sure how much longer he could keep that promise to her. The next morning, Malik spent hours reviewing everything he had seen over the past few weeks. He pulled out his phone and began digging into the little bits of information he had gathered. He knew it was time to act, but he needed to be careful. This wasn't like an operation overseas, this was his sister's life. He couldn't risk making things worse. The thing that bothered him the most was the way the attackers had worked in the shadows. They weren't just random acts of vandalism or noise, they were calculated, meant to send a message. They'd been following her, studying her schedule. Whoever was behind this was smart enough to know when and where to strike. Malik had a few ideas. It wasn't difficult to see who stood to gain from all the trouble Tasha had stirred up. There were some powerful people in town who didn't like the changes she was pushing for. But that wasn't enough, he needed names. And to get names he needed to dig deeper. Later that afternoon, Malik decided to take a walk. He needed to clear his head. As he strolled through the neighborhood, he watched the houses, the streets, the people. His military training had taught him to notice the small things, the way a car was parked, the way someone avoided eye contact, the way people acted when they thought no one was watching. He kept his head low, not drawing attention to himself, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the world around him. It wasn't long before he found something. Near the corner of the street, there was an old building that had recently been sold. The new owners were renovating it, but Malik had heard rumors about the place. Some local businesses had been talking about a new investor who had recently moved into town. The renovations were happening quickly, and the workers were mostly quiet, almost too quiet. Malik's instincts told him that something didn't add up. He took note of the building's location and the workmen's schedule. If someone in town had connections to the people behind the threats, it was likely they would be here that evening. Malik returned home and started researching the new owners. His fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for any connection to the racist group he had heard whispers about. After an hour of digging, he found a name: Harlan Cooper, a wealthy businessman who had recently relocated to the area. His company had ties to multiple local organizations, but Malik couldn't find much else. Still, the name stuck in his mind. The next day, Malik decided to pay a visit to a few of the local shops around the building he had observed. He spoke with a few owners, casually asking about the renovations and the new owner. One of the shopkeepers, a woman in her 50s named Miss Clara, hesitated before responding. "He's a quiet one, doesn't say much, comes and goes. But I've heard things. You should be careful around him." Malik's ears perked up. "What kind of things?" "Miss..." Clara looked around, then leaned in. "Some folks think he's not as clean as he claims. I don't know much, but I've seen people in and out of there, people who don't look like they belong in a nice town like this. I'm not saying anything, but you should watch your back." Malik thanked her and left, his mind turning over. The new information. Cooper was an outsider, someone with money and influence who had moved into town under mysterious circumstances. That alone was enough to raise suspicions. But the people he was associating with, those were the ones Malik needed to focus on. As the days passed, Malik spent more time in the neighborhood, trying to piece together a clearer picture. His gut told him that the people behind Tasha's harassment weren't just out to scare her, they wanted to intimidate the entire community. They wanted to send a message that anyone who stood up for change would face consequences. One afternoon, Malik got a tip from an old friend who still had connections with local law enforcement. "I can't tell you much," the friend said, "but you're on the right track. Harlan Cooper's been tied to some shady dealings in other towns. He's got a lot of influence. And there are rumors about him and a group that's been causing trouble in the area." This was the breakthrough Malik needed. Cooper wasn't just an outsider. He was connected to something much darker. The pieces were falling into place. He was no longer dealing with random threats. This was organized, planned, and methodical. Malik knew he had to act fast. Tasha was still recovering from the attack, but Malik wasn't going to wait any longer. He couldn't. He started quietly watching the building again, taking note of the comings and goings, but he wasn't alone. It didn't take long before Malik noticed someone else watching him. A man in a black SUV parked a few blocks away, always with his eyes on Malik's every move. The tension in the air thickened. Whoever was behind the attacks on Tasha knew someone was getting closer to the truth, and they were starting to get nervous. Malik's mind raced as he made his next move. He couldn't confront Cooper directly, not yet, but he knew this game was far from over. He had to stay one step ahead, and he would. The following morning started quietly. A soft breeze moved through the town, trees swayed gently, and birds sang like it was any other normal day. But for Malik Johnson, nothing felt normal anymore. Something had changed deep inside him. The calm, peaceful life he had hoped for was gone. What replaced it was a growing fire, a need for answers and justice. He wasn't acting out of anger. It was something deeper, a quiet promise he had made to himself the night he saw his sister injured and scared. Tasha was feeling a bit better physically, though she still moved slowly. The bruises were fading, and the cut on her arm was healing. But emotionally, she wasn't quite herself. Her laughter had become rare, and her usual spark seemed dim. Malik saw it, even though she tried hard to hide it. They sat together on her porch that morning. The air was fresh, and the sunlight felt warm on their faces. "You don't have to stay here every night." "You know," Tasha said softly, sipping her tea. "I know," Malik replied, "but I want to." She smiled a little, then looked out at the street. "You think they'll come back?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But if they do, they won't find the same man waiting." Tasha turned to him. "What does that mean?" Malik didn't answer directly. Instead, he changed the subject. "I've been learning more about this Harlan Cooper guy. He's not just a businessman. He's careful. He hides behind other people. I think he's been organizing others too. Do his work. You think he's the one behind everything?" she asked. "I think he's part of it. Maybe not alone. But someone like him doesn't just settle in a new town and suddenly have power unless he's backed by something ... or someone." Tasha nodded. "So what now?" Malik took a slow breath. "Now, I dig deeper quietly and I try to find a way to make people listen." Over the next few days, Malik became even more careful. He walked different routes, parked blocks away from places he visited, and never followed the same routine twice. He wasn't trying to be sneaky, he was being safe. He knew that the people watching him were smart. But he had training, and he was patient. He paid another visit to Miss Clara, the kind shopkeeper who had spoken to him before. She seemed a bit nervous this time. "You're still asking questions?" she whispered. "I thought you'd back off after what happened." Malik shook his head. "Backing off isn't going to make this stop. I just need help understanding why people like Cooper are here ... and what they want." Miss Clara glanced toward the door before leaning in. "They want control," she said. "They want things to stay the way they used to be, quiet, comfortable, for them, anyway. People like your sister. They challenge that. They bring change. And not everyone wants that." Malik thanked her and left, thoughtful. He knew she was right. This wasn't just about Tasha. It was about power, fear, and the people who tried to hold onto it by making others feel small. Later that week, Malik made a quiet visit to one of his old friends, Daniel Reyes, a former military technician who now worked in private security. Daniel was surprised to see Malik, but welcomed him in with a firm handshake. "I heard about your sister," Daniel sighed. "Terrible news. She's strong," Malik replied. "But I need your help," Daniel nodded. "What do you need?" "Information." Quietly. "Anything you can find on Harlan Cooper, his business, his associates. Especially people who've been coming in and out of that old building on 5th Street, Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're serious about this?" "I have to be," Malik said. "They've already hurt her?" "I won't wait for them to try." Again, Daniel promised to look into it. "Give me a few days." Malik left feeling more hopeful. If anyone could find what he needed, it was Daniel. In the meantime, Malik tried to keep life as normal as possible for Tasha. He brought her meals, helped her clean up the house, and walked with her in the park near her school. He could tell she appreciated it. But the weight on her shoulders hadn't gone away. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, she turned to him suddenly. "Malik, what if they never stop? What if people like Cooper always find new ways to stay in control?" He paused, thinking. "Then we keep standing, we speak louder. We protect what's right. That's what you've been doing. And I'm just catching up." Tasha smiled for the first time in days. 2 days later, Daniel called Malik. "I found something," he said. "Cooper's company is just a shell. The real money comes from a group that's been flagged before in other states. Nothing confirmed. But their pattern is clear: move into small towns, buy property, build influence through donations, and slowly push out people who speak up. Your sister? She got in the way. Who's behind them?" Malik asked. "Hard to say. They use layers. But I got names of a few people who've been connected. 2 of them are already here in town. I'll send you the file." That night, Malik sat at his desk reading through the documents. The pieces fit together like a puzzle. Cooper was part of a larger effort to quietly change the town's balance. It wasn't just about fear. It was about slowly gaining control over schools, neighborhoods, even the police. He leaned back in his chair, feeling both alarmed and determined. If he could prove even half of what was in these documents, he could wake the town up. But it had to be done right. If he moved too quickly, they'd bury everything. If he waited too long, Tasha or someone else might get hurt again. So he made a plan. He would collect statements from others who had faced harassment. He would gather witnesses who had seen suspicious activity, and then he'd present everything. At the upcoming town hall meeting, a public place in front of the entire community, no back rooms, no secrets. The next day, he began making quiet visits to people in the community. He spoke with parents, teachers, even business owners. Some were afraid to talk. Others opened up once they knew someone was finally listening. A week later, he had a binder full of notes, names, dates, and patterns. Tasha, seeing the effort he was putting in, asked, "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," he replied. "You've done everything you could. Now let me do my part." And so, the night of the town meeting came. The room was packed. People filled the chairs, lined the walls, and stood near the doors. The mayor sat at the front with the city council. Harlan Cooper was also there, sitting calmly in the front row. Malik stepped up to speak, holding the binder in his hand, and as he began, the room fell silent. The town hall was completely silent as Malik stepped up to the microphone. Every eye was on him, including Harlan Cooper's. Malik could feel the weight of the moment, but he didn't feel nervous. He felt ready. He had prepared for days, gathered facts, spoken to people, and now he was standing there not just as Tasha's brother, but as a voice for everyone who had felt ignored or pushed aside. "Good evening," Malik began, his voice calm but steady. "My name is Malik Johnson. Many of you know my sister Tasha. She's a teacher here, someone who has worked hard for this community. Recently, she was harmed in an incident that wasn't just an accident, it was part of something bigger." He paused, letting his words settle into the room. "For weeks, we've seen troubling things. Threats, vandalism, fear. People walking a little faster, looking over their shoulders, and staying quiet because they don't want to be the next target." Some heads in the audience nodded. A few people exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the truth in Malik's words. "I'm not here to point fingers without proof," he continued, lifting the binder in his hand. "I've collected information, statements, timelines, even financial records. What I found shows a pattern that we can't ignore. It shows an effort to quietly control this town, to make people afraid to speak up. And it starts with a man who moved here not long ago. A man who says he's investing in our community, but whose past shows a different story." He looked straight at Harlan Cooper. The man didn't flinch, but his smile had faded. "This man," Malik said clearly, "has been linked to efforts in other towns where people were silenced, pushed out, and intimidated. Businesses were bought, local leaders were pressured, and voices that stood for fairness and equality were slowly shut down. He turned back to the crowd. But we are not those towns. Not if we choose to be better, not if we stand together. The audience stirred. People whispered, some sat straighter in their seats. A woman near the back raised her hand. What can we do? She asked. Malik gave a small smile. We start by speaking up, by asking questions, by showing up. We hold people accountable, not just the ones causing problems, but also the ones who stay silent and let it happen. A man near the front stood. I've owned a business here for 15 years. I saw strange things happening around that building on 5th Street. I didn't say anything. I didn't want trouble. But I see now that silence is part of the problem. More people began to nod. Another voice chimed in. I was afraid too. But now that I hear you, I want to help. Malik nodded. It starts here, tonight. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, fairness, and making our town a place where no one has to be afraid because of who they are or what they believe in. The mayor spoke next. Mr. Johnson, would you be willing to submit your report to the town council? I already have copies, Malik said, lifting a folder and handing it over. As the meeting continued, more community members shared their stories. Some were small things, rude comments, ignored complaints, but they added up to a bigger picture. People began to realize that what happened to Tasha wasn't just an isolated event. It was a warning sign. After the meeting, many people approached Malik, shaking his hand, thanking him. Even those who had never spoken to him before showed appreciation. Tasha stood nearby, watching her brother. She had never felt more proud. For weeks, she had carried the pain of what happened alone. But now, it didn't feel so heavy. The town was waking up. People were seeing the truth. Malik, she said quietly as they walked to the car that night, you didn't just help me, you helped everyone. He smiled. You were the reason I started. But this fight was bigger than us. The next few weeks brought changes. The city council opened an official investigation into Cooper's property deals and financial activities. His business came under review, and several employees came forward with information. Slowly, the wall of silence began to crack. Though nothing illegal had been proven yet, the pressure made a difference. Cooper kept a low profile, and eventually he put his building project on hold. Some say he planned to leave town, while others believed he was waiting for things to quiet down. But the town didn't go quiet. Instead, people kept talking. More community meetings were held. New neighborhood programs were launched. A support group for those who had felt bullied or unsafe was created. Tasha became one of the organizers. Her experience became a reason for others to speak up, to share, and to heal. Malik didn't stay in the spotlight. He wasn't looking for attention, but people remembered what he had done. They remembered the quiet man who stood up and made others feel strong. One day, a group of students from Tasha's school approached her. They had started a small project called Voices of Change, a mural that celebrated local heroes. On the wall of the school, they painted images of people who had made a difference. Teachers, nurses, shop owners, and in one corner, a man standing strong, holding a binder. Tasha smiled when she saw it. They didn't even ask him? Sighed, laughing. He probably wouldn't have let them, her colleague replied. Malik just shook his head when he saw it. I'm not a hero, he said, but Tasha looked at him with quiet pride. You are to me. And so life slowly returned to normal. Or maybe it didn't return, it became something better. People were more aware, more connected. They knew that standing together mattered, and that even in a quiet town, voices could make a difference. Real change didn't always come with noise. Sometimes it came in small conversations, in honest truths and brave choices. Malik stayed in town a bit longer, helping Tasha with small things and checking in with people he had met. Eventually, he packed his bags and prepared to return to his own life. But before he left, he took one last walk through the neighborhood, the place where the story had begun. As he passed the school, he stopped and looked at the mural. The sun hit it just right, making the colors glow. He smiled, then kept walking, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The fight hadn't been loud, but it had been strong. And sometimes quiet strength was all it took to change the world one step at a time.